Welcome to our event, My Life, My Business. Wish I was here, which as usual just speaks to the level of engagement that we have with our lives, including our careers and the businesses that we run or our organizations, but that we're so fully present that the journey of doing all these things of life is enjoyable. So, a wonderful welcome to my co host, Shanaz, who is going to be leading our topic this afternoon. But yes, buckle your seatbelts and over to you, Shanaz.
Hi there, everyone. Jock and I are going to have a conversation about male depression and suicide. And I know that it seems like a very heavy topic, but I think that sometimes you need to address topics like this if we're going to be real and authentic. I was particularly interested in this topic because often because of my interest actually in gender-based violence. And you may ask, so how does gender-based violence, when it's particularly men who are the perpetrators, how come male depression is, how come I'm interested in that? And what I found in my research is that a lot of when I've engaged in conversations with men about the reasons that they have become violent in a relationship, and it's absolutely no excuse, but the contributing factors have sometimes, and the research is indicating that mental health in men is a particular contributing factor to violence in a relationship. And particularly what we also discover is that when we look at our South African statistics, I don't have it quite on hand, but just anecdotally, when you see men have been violent, often the violent turns towards themselves, and you see familicide, where unfortunately it's the who are killing their wives, their children, and then turning the gun or the instrument, particularly the gun, on themselves, is actually men. So it is a male, it isn't, there is something to be considered when we start to think about suicide, and particularly in men. There is this connection to violence in a relationship due to men's mental health. And so I've listened to a video that a friend sent to me. I haven't seen the program actually, and it's called Tea with Water. And he actually talks about, he invites um a psychologist, a male psychologist, to come and talk to him about male depression and suicide, because it's something, not only is suicide mm, a sort of stigmatized, and so we don't speak about it sufficiently in society and in our communities, but it's also we struggle to talk about it. And also the thing is that it's an issue in our society globally, but particularly I think it was in light of gender-based violence, and in a sense the the issues that come up for men, the particular concerns that men have. um, and it's all really, for me, it's really about how do we prevent violence in relationships. But we cannot, the research is showing that we cannot attend to violence in relationships when it's male perpetrated if we haven't addressed the mental health needs of men. And so this video goes into detail about what to look out for. It goes into it goes into a discussion around why men are reluctant to go for help. And that often what he says is that men will only go for counseling when they are facing an end, when the relationship is ending. and they generally struggle to ask for help. And so, I want to kind of explore that. It's also in light of sometimes when you look at suicide in police officers, it tends to be men. And I think that this is something to talk about. Why is it happening a lot in men in our society? And so I know, Jacques, that you've listened to it, and I was just thinking, what are your, just in response to my comments, what are your thoughts and views, whether that includes, what came up necessary for you, or your thoughts on the video itself, the YouTube, the episode, as well as my, what I've said about, men, etc.
Well, it was a very interesting video to watch, and the comments around um, the sort of the role confusion that has been generated presently among men. First and foremost, as one of the key drivers to why male suicides are so high. And what was telling was, and it was something that you alluded to in just the past conversation. It's the stat that, yes, globally, suicides are highest among men, but depression is highest among women. And the point was that men choose very violent means to end their lives, as if the pain is some form of penitence, or the process of going through it is sort of some form of, I don't know if I even remember it correctly, but the point being that it deals with the mental state. But that mental state arises, one of the contributing factors, coming back to this, what I want to call role confusion, is that the expectation that men must be strong, irrespective of circumstances. And it's probably dealing with either the historical nature of how society has been operating, being very patriarchal. But the point is that as a man you need to be strong. As a man, no matter what the particular situation is, you need to come into the rescue. You need to be dependable. And what tends to happen is then the sense of failure from a man's perspective is so deep that when they cannot be strong, and when they fail, and when they cannot be the provider in the household, the decision then turns into death by suicide. What was also interesting is that the correct term, he was saying, this therapist was saying, that we don't refer to it, or the professional is not referred to as committing suicide. It's rather death by suicide, because the stigma attached to suicides, because you make a decision and it's a cop out. In fact, there's so many multitudes of factors leading to that point. And to your earlier point is, why don't men reach out and talk about this? Because the host of this video was asking, but a friend of his also committed suicide, but what are the signs? And it was quite interesting, is that the way the signs need, and I just pick on some as I listen to it, but when men express the fact in the negative that they will never take their own lives, which means you need to, it's not something that you take very lightly when a man says that, and you therefore feel more secure when a man says, but I will never take my own life, I'll never do this, I'll never do that. Generally what he was referring to, when a man does say that, he is secretly thinking about it, and he's addressing his own thoughts in the moment. And he shares several examples that support his view. And he said something interesting also when he spoke about, just in relationships, the expectations that a man must be in touch with himself, he must communicate, he must take a leaf out of the woman's book by expressing himself, being in touch with his feelings. But when it comes to the dating world, it's interesting that the man must have a job, a man must drive a certain car, live in a certain house, must be able to support the person that he's dating or going to marry. Whereas where women are not under the same pressure to perform, they don't have to have a job, they don't have to own anything to participate in a relationship. And he was making the point that relationships are so transactional, and and literally where um, divorce is such a huge stress contributor, is that men look at that as failure, and they look at it as the end has come, and and they wait until the end to talk about it, when the writing is on the wall, when the partner's already decided they've had enough and they're leaving, then they want to talk about it, then they want to say things. So but there's a parallel experience that I've had, maybe just to bring that in as I was listening to all this. And I was reminded that, when I started my business coaching clusters to assist with strategic planning for groups of businesses, entrepreneurs, I must tell you, one of the things I frequently said to my audience, because we had breakfast sessions, is that one of the principal reasons why I wanted the networking and why I was doing these clusters is so that men can talk up and speak up. And I did say men at that stage because my perception was that women in business would speak up, but since then in business is not quite doesn't quite not governed by the same rules. That a man in business will literally reach out for assistance when his business is going under. you know he will then try everything to get the kind of funding, etc., he needs, and mostly it is too late in business. You should have spoken up. So my point was, give the man the opportunity, build a safe space so that he can talk about the things that he feels he should be able to deal with by himself, like cash flow issues, lying awake at night and then pretending the following day that everything is fine, going to network events, pretending that his business is successful, and so on and so on. So waiting until that last moment to ask for assistance, to speak up, seems to be a tendency, which it's not just as far as suicides are concerned and gender-based violence, and it seems to be all pervasive in all different areas. And lastly, I just want to say that I mean, being a man myself, what really struck me was this pressure you feel as a man. Well, society has adjusted, the view of genders has changed so much, the view of gender fluidity that exists, etc., and your choice of who you want to be doesn't change the fundamental pressure, internal pressure that you feel that you need to perform. That at the you need to be strong and you need to protect the weak. Um, and yeah, and I mean, we know that. Therefore, to be strong, to be seen to be strong, even asking for directions, and not knowing where you're going and not knowing how to get to your destination is a form of weakness. So I think as a man, just generally, we don't want to show weakness because we were raised that if there's a threat in the environment, you never show weakness. You only show strength. I know there was like a long feedback there, Shanaz, but that's where I stand.
No, that was great. It is so helpful actually, because it made me think. I know a situation where there is a couple, and the husband is in a business and it's on teetering on like disaster, and he really struggles to talk about it. And like you said, it's amazing that connection that they will go to for ask for help until it's too late almost. And I see that in, like you said, it's something that happens in business. And I mean, I've known several male entrepreneurs in the family and extended family and friends, etc. And it's really interesting. I've seen that situation. um kind of over and over, they are asking for help when it's too late. And in fact, my brother-in-law won't mind me saying this, so they went, my sister and my brother went to Italy, etc., and he just kind of follows, and then he got frustrated when they got lost, and then he was, kind of candidly sharing with us yesterday. But it's true that he he would refuse to ask for help, even, and he literally almost fainted. Well, he kind of did faint from the heat in Rome. That he would rather faint than ask for help, and that is so crazy. But I understand it. The other thing that is really interesting to note is that one of the features of resilience is actually the ability to ask for help. And maybe that is something that I heard this resilient speaker talk about, that that's something that we need to encourage in children, to know that it's okay to ask for help. And coming back then to this idea that men don't talk until the very last. And I appreciate what you said, that even though all of these things are happening and there's a change in gender, the internal pressure, and I hadn't thought about that the internal pressure remains the same. And I do have to say that, as someone that advocates around women's empowerment, particularly in violent relationships, when I listened to the episode on tea with Berta, I'd never thought about the fact, and maybe, so some of my concern with when people are the gender based violence advocates, and the women female activists, and I'm very supportive of them, is that we don't actually, because we are thinking from a female perspective, we sometimes, I find myself not thinking about some of the things like, wow, it's true what you say, and what the psychologist said, that a woman doesn't actually, in order to engage in a relationship, she doesn't actually need a job, she doesn't need qualifications, she doesn't need a car, she doesn't need a house. And I'd never thought about that. And I remember kind of my friend and I having this, and I'm like admitting here, um I realize how women maintain that pressure. I remember having a conversation with a high school, with not a high school friend, a varsity friend of mine, and we had this discussion whether we would date a post office, like a postman. And it came up because somebody that we knew was dating a postman, and I have to admit that we were quite prejudiced about the jobs of the person that we would be engaging in. And again, it made me realize that the amount of pressure, I quite hadn't understood the amount of pressure that men are under when they are dating, in terms of the car, in terms of having the apartment, and I think possibly the shame that they experience. And so my dad, because of his bipolar, he didn't work, but I know that throughout his life, when he was working, I mean, he then start his contribution was, then he would cook, and he would look after us, he'd do the school drops, and he did a lot of nurturing things, but it was never as valued as what going out and earning his money, to work meant. And even not, and we really tried to encourage him, and we loved him for that. He was like, he was, in terms of the nurturer in the family, and that was really, he was so skilled at it, and caring and kind in that way. But I think for society and others, that's not valued in men. So I think as women, we contribute to this, because I often say when I'm training, women raise children, women raise boys also. So what are our expectations about how we raise them? And so, when it comes to dating, even the car situation, when I have these discussions in my class, I can see the girls and the guys, bringing up the same conversations about, or is she gonna date someone with a car? Or if he pitches up there and they've got to Uber, you know, they are real, they are standards which I think women do set for the men in their lives, which may be at times, due to the economy, due to the situation, men are not able to live up to those expectations. The other thing I want to add, which maybe you can come in here, I was also kind of thinking about it. The psychologist said that he no longer lives in the era where men had the privilege of male patriarchy, and that the toxicity that they talk about, male toxicity, actually then therefore extends to men too. And I did want to say that I hadn't thought about that had come up in my research, where the men were saying, but women have so many privileges these days. And I hadn't thought about how the generation has changed, and that while men in a sense experience the privilege of patriarchy, maybe that generation has shifted and they're not experiencing it, and this does leave men in a particularly vulnerable position then. Yeah, and just wondered what you kind of thought about that.
Yeah, maybe I can come from it in this way, is that the rules I know, and this is basically in your expertise. We are fundamentally wired as men, to protect and to fight off the threat and things like that. And it's like, and being proud to step into that role. And that's why I started talking about this role confusion, because I think the rules have changed. You needed to be you knew, within that society, your competition was a man, another man, and you will aspire to beat down another man, and implicitly you knew the rules. you know Cowboys don't cry, cowboys don't flinch, and you never give in, you never give up. Coming back to the strength example, but the point about the rules that have so shifted is that it's inbuilt to a large degree, I guess, and I think there's a primitive role there, which is more nature, which is not nurture. And I think maybe society has changed a lot, but because I come from a different era altogether, I can say it's probably nature, as far as the instinctive behavior of a man, or males are. That would lend itself to, how do you compete, that competitive spirit, with somebody who understands the rules. The rules stay the same now. And during this video, it was interesting that, within every context there is a view. He spoke about employment equity, saying that historically advantaged people were white males, and historically the most historically disadvantaged people were black females. So right now, for most males in general, having to learn how to compete with a woman is an issue, because the rules are not the same. There's no implicit rules. You try to understand and compete at a different level. Women embrace a whole wide range of things, and I personally believe, in general, in people empowerment, whether you male or female, and specifically not to discriminate. I don't believe in discrimination, but the point is that as a man, how do you compete? So you got to go learn how to compete. Yeah, now you're watching what a woman does naturally very well, and then you have to compete on that level to get ahead. Now it's just a perspective. I mean, there's a woman that might, I mean, you're a woman, but other women listening to this might go, no, no, nothing has ever changed, etc., etc. But the dynamics of, and I referred to this, during one of our previous discussions in July. There's an expectation that because you are strong, because these implicit rules are in place, you shall be respected. So, what does one man want from another man? Is respect. But what a man really wants is to be respected by a woman as well. When you're competing in today's world, within a work environment, etc., for a position, etc., I just think the rules have so changed. And now is, how do you adapt yourself? Well, we hear all kinds of things about how we need to shift into being so different. And I do think it's very hard to listen to the different types of feedback we're getting, and how the topic of male toxicity is addressed. Um, and it's no reason for men then to, evolve or dissolve, let's put it this way, or resort to violence in a relationship. But there are some dynamics that are happening, and as I say this, off the cuff, it's the implicit rules have changed, and interpreting those new rules, I think, is a challenge. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think that is,
Absolutely.
yeah. Okay, so just to kind of round this off. So within the context of male patriarchy, I think it's easier to navigate, even though as a man you could be facing trauma within that same patriarchy. It's just that you understand it much better. There's a familiarity to it. You know what it is. If you wanted to survive, it is the strong that survive. The rules of the jungle, you know, um, is something that is the governing principle. And even though you lose, you don't lose with the level of or lack of self-respect. Anyway, I just want to end it there.
Yeah, thank you. That is very interesting, and I brought up that whole issue around men and respect, and then the winning and losing, that that you it's considered that. And I think that maybe for those working in women's empowerment in that field, and working in organizations and companies, that's something to be considered. And I do think that the expectation, then I think that women also have a role to play when we create those expectations, because I think that I've heard it in my classes and in conversations. So the women don't want the man to be aggressive, etc. But then they also don't, then I've also heard conversations, why can't he just be a man, so then and guys have said in my class, young men have said that it's really confusing for them. And of course it creates all sorts of debates in class. But it's I think that this is exactly where you say that interpretation now of where they are at, and the shift in the privilege in privileging women, or the aim to privileging women, so that women can be empowered, and that we can reduce the amount of discrimination that would previously or still currently going on for some women, is quite complex. But what I also wanted to end off with then is that, can we urge men then, um, to be okay with asking for help, and that if you are experiencing low moods for more than 3 months, that you do seek help, that you go to your GP, that it's not, in this day and age, while culturally it often seems like men have to be strong, there are male counselors, and there are male coaches who would be happy to listen and support men. And I think that that's maybe something that we need to think about, that sometimes it doesn't mean going to a woman if you're not feeling comfortable, but there is support available, and they are male counselors and coaches who would be willing to listen and support you. And yeah, so that's what I would, really want to encourage. Asking for help is one of those features of resilience. Before your business closes, or before the house is sold, before the relationship ends, before the marriage ends, it's really important. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm. Thank you, Shanaz. I guess um, either find a safe space or develop a safe space that will enable you as a man listening to be able to communicate timelessly. So obviously, I always feel when we deal with these weighty topics, I mean, we've spent a short time at it. There's always more to discuss, more to really delve into. But thank you, Shanaz, for just hosting this topic. Really appreciate it. And yeah, for those of you listening, you can go listen to the recording on Clubhouse, the playback, and then or you can listen to the edited version on the Mufasa Coaching Practice YouTube channel. So until next week, then have a fabulous week and communicate, communicate, ask for directions before you become completely lost
Or before you faint.
or before you faint.
Right. Oh, I'll have to chat to him about that fainting story.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right.
Bye.
Bye.